All right, so let's go ahead and do the interest entry on a premium account as far as doing the journal entry with it. Now, please keep in mind, we do not have to do the PRT, P times R times T thing. We only do that during the interest entry of the face value interest entry. That's the only time we do it. What we do under premium and discount is we do what we call the amortization. Okay, that's where we're going to spread the bond premium or the bond discount, depending on which item you're working on, over the life of the loan. So let's go back to the question that we have in our slides here and take a look at slide number 9 first. Here we did the issuance of the premium, and you can see that our premium is $6,000. So what we have to do is we got to amortize that over the life of the bond. Now, here's where you got to pay attention. You see that bond premium in your issuance entry is a credit. So to get rid of the credit in this case, we're going to have to do a debit. Okay. Now, the first step is to go ahead and figure out, let's set up our journal entry for this. So we know that we're going to be debiting bonds premium. We know that we're going to be debiting interest expense, and we know that we're going to be crediting cash. So first thing you should do automatically, and I try to get you guys to do this in steps, is put down the information that you know. Okay, you know you're going to debit interest expense, you know you're going to credit cash. Those are two that you know right off the top. So go ahead and put those on there. The next thing that you now know is that you have to amortize your bond premium. And to amortize it, you have to do the opposite of what we did in the issuance entry. So if you look at the issuance entry on slide number 9, bonds premium was a credit. So to get rid of that credit, we're going to have to do a debit. So go ahead and set up bond premium as a debit. Now, the other thing that we can fill in, now that we got our 3 accounts that we're going to be using, is we can fill in a number. I told you guys that rule number 2 that's in red, I think it's slide number 7, 6, or 7, that's in red. The second rule says that cash will always be the same in all 3 entries. So in this example, if you move to slide number 12, we figured out the amount of cash, the last 2 journal entries in the last two videos that you had, and we figured out the amount of cash was going to be $9,000. We already knew that. So fill in that $9,000 right now. If we were sitting in class, everything that you guys do, partial credit. Okay, it's hard to give partial credit on the computer doing this online, but I will still be able to tell whether you did follow the rules or not by just the simple fact that between the 2 rules I've given you, when you complete a completed problem, you should be able to tell if you've done most of it right or wrong. Okay, if you follow the rules. First rule was that bonds payable will be the same in all 3 of the issuance entries. The amount of cash that's going to be credited in the interest entry is going to be the same. So when you're doing your journal entries and you get done with the 6 journal entries we've been talking about here, once you get through them, that's when you sit there and say, okay, check my rules. If your rules work, then you pretty much probably, I would say, most likely have got most of it correct. So now you've got your cash number built in there. Now you've got to figure out what your bond premium is going to be. And what you would do to do that, and if you go back to slide number 9, our bond premium was $6,000. Okay? So we know the bond premium was $6,000. Now we have to divide by the number of payments that this company is going to have for this bond in particular. And in this case, the bond is for 5 years, and we're paying interest twice a year, which means we have to make 10 equal payments. Okay? So if you take $6,000 and divide by 10, that will give you $600. That will be your debit for bond premium. Now, how do you figure out the interest entry? Well, going back to financial, you know that your journal entries all have to balance. So right now you've got a debit for $600 and you've got a credit for $9,000. And if you subtract them, that will give you the $8,400 that you see written on your interest expense. Okay? Now, the key here is I need you to pay attention and just take a look at your issuance entry when I tell you to, like I have. Go back. Fill in the accounts that you know and fill them in as you go. Don't try to start with interest expense and figure out how much that is and then go to the next line and try to figure out what that would be. Fill in the numbers you know. Work backwards. Okay? One of the reasons that this is helpful is A, you'll be able to get through the problem a little bit easier. And B, when you guys graduate and you get out there and get real jobs, employers are going to want to see that you have the capabilities to work backwards, to try to get things figured out, even without knowing all the variables. Okay? It's one of those abilities that employers these days are searching for, that will, that drive, that ability to push forward and get stuff done. Okay? So, like I've said to you before, the worst case scenario is I can't stand when people just throw their arms up in the air. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's the old saying. Where there's a will, there's a way. Don't get distraught, okay? Listen to your videos again and again if you have to. Every single tip that I could possibly give you, I've given you in these videos. Now, with that being said, I'm going to give you the very last journal entry, which is not in your slides at all. Okay, the last journal entry is not in your slides at all, so it's only verbally being given to you. It is a very easy journal entry, so do not get all worried that, oh my God, it's not in my slides. Well, this is also going to show me that if you listen to your slides and pay attention to your slides, that you've actually done that part too. The last journal entry that we have to worry about when it comes to bonds is at the end of, let's say, for instance, these bonds that we're using with our slideshow here. So let's go to slide number 8. Okay, and this is very easy. You only have to do this journal entry once, because this journal entry will be the same for all three of the scenarios. You're only going to have to write it once. Now, what happens at the end of the 5th year? At the end of the bond, which is after 5 years that you've borrowed somebody's money for, that person that you borrowed the money from is going to expect their money back. Okay? So at the end of the 5th year is what we call our maturity date. Our maturity date is when that bond literally comes due. That's when you've got to pay that person back for the money that you have borrowed. Now, that's a pretty easy journal entry. Okay, so if you're having to pay somebody back, what do you think how are you paying them back? Let me ask you that question. How are you paying this person back? Well, obviously, chances are, most likely, 99%, is you're going to be giving them back cash. So in your rules, you know that cash goes down with and hopefully you guys are all saying to yourselves in the back of your mind, cash goes down with a credit. So go ahead and write that account down as a credit. Now, the next part of the journal entry is whenever you're doing journal entries, you always want to piecemeal them together. Well, now you're paying cash, and what are you paying cash for? Well, you're paying back your bond payable. Bond payable is a liability, so it goes up with a credit and goes down with a debit. So in this case, if we're paying $500,000 back to the person we borrowed it to, our liability is now going down also because we're paying them back. If you borrow $10 from your roommate and you give it to him on Tuesday and today's Wednesday, you don't still owe him $10. You just gave it to him yesterday. Okay, so we have to get rid of our bond payable liability. And the way you get rid of a liability account with it going down is with a debit. So in this case, you're going to debit, for the example that we have in our slides, the debit is going to be to bonds payable in the amount of $200,000, and you're going to credit cash for $200,000. That's what we call our payoff entry or our maturity date entry. Okay? So to complete a full-fledged problem for this chapter, you're going to end up doing 7 journal entries altogether. And on your homework that I'm going to be posting, along with the next chapter slides, chapter 11 slides today, you're going to see, and I will discuss all 7 journal entries again with you. The homework assignment's going to have 3 or 4 of them for you to do, but it will also have an example problem that I've done. And you can go ahead and follow along my example problem with the lecture that I'm going to put with it. Okay? So, hang tough. This is your interest entry at face value, but it also has your payoff entry. So please make sure that you understand that the payoff entry or maturity date entry is not in your notes. It is not in your slides. So please make sure that you understand that the only way for you to be able to understand how to do that entry, which it's a very easy entry, is by listening to your slides. One of the things I want to point out to you guys is I can tell when you listen and I can tell when you don't. I can see how many times things have been clicked on. I can see how many times you've clicked into class. So please, 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 let's get through this. Another way to think about your maturity date entry or your payment date entry, it is just flipping your initial issuance entry. If you look at your issuance entry on slide number 8, we debited cash for $200 and we credited bonds payable. The payoff entry is just flipping that upside down to have your bonds payable as a debit and your cash as a credit. Okay? So it's an easy entry to work with. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and upload this so that you have all 3 scenarios for you to be able to follow the videos from. So